So I've got two moms that are going to join me. I want to do a talk on menopause and motherhood. So raising young kiddos. I've got two girls. They're 11 and 7. And raising young kiddos during this time period can be tough. So I wanted to bring together a couple other moms and just have a conversation around that, right? As we're going through all of these changes with their life, we're still trying to take care of little kids, and how do we still be there for them? How do we hold space for all of their emotions and all of their things while still managing all of our stuff? So I'm excited about that. So that's on the docket, menopause and motherhood. The other one that I'm putting together is menopause and mental health, or really isolation, which can start to happen, right? As we go through all these hormonal changes, we can start to go through all these changes, and sometimes we tend to withdraw, right? We kind of retreat because we don't know what's happening. We don't understand, is this real? Is it not? Maybe our moms didn't tell us about it, or our aunts didn't tell us about it. In my case, my mom died when I was still pretty young, and it wasn't a topic of conversation with my aunts. And even as a doc, right, as I started to go through all these perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms, it can rock your foundation, and sort of not understanding why that's happening. Sometimes we tend to retreat and tend to isolate. We don't reach out because we just don't understand. So I'd love to do a talk on menopause and mental health, or isolation. One thing that's come up in my conversation with some patients, not necessarily around menopause, is the topic of our brains will believe what we tell it. It's this fascinating thing, right? I mean, we used to think many years ago the brain was not really, it couldn't learn, or couldn't it's called, plasticity. And now we're understanding that it has a tremendous potential. We are not just stuck with what we get. We can sort of mold and continue to create new synapses and that kind of thing. And there's this wonderful concept of, what we put out, we tend to get back. What we reflect, we tend to get back. So our brains will believe what we tell it. And I get it, right? There are times where we were just like, as I've heard my parents and older ones said, fit to be tied, right? We're just so overwhelmed. We can't possibly find moments of gratitude, moments of joy, moments of just being thankful for very small things, because sometimes it's just so overwhelming. But if there's ever an opportunity to hold space for, even if it's just something small, and putting that out there and taking that in, your brain will change its outlook. It takes a tremendous amount of effort, but wherever you think you can do that, continuing to sort of exercise that gratitude, that practice, focusing on what's going well in spite of how hard things are, can start to shift the brain's perception a little bit. So that can also be really, really powerful. It takes time, it takes practice, and I'm not suggesting that, when the S is hitting the fan and life is horrible, that, if I just, rah and think of something good, life is going to be grand. I'm not trying to oversimplify that by any means, and trying to minimize mental health, but it's just in our small ways can we shift our thinking, and our brain can start to perceive things a little bit differently. So I think there's this perception that meditation sometimes has to be this stop everything, really quiet room. Maybe that's my misperception. I'll raise my hand on that one, right? This initially was this, stop everything you're doing. There has to be this really quiet room, and you're sort of sitting, and then this, like, it's a whole thing. But what I've realized is that you can find moments in our day, even in the chaos, right? To meditate, to kind of just slow the breath. But yeah, meditation can be anywhere, right? It's just finding moments to slow down and be present, be mindful. At least that's how I now see it, as opposed to it having to be what I thought was this whole production. It just seems so overwhelming. Even with that, I will say that I am practicing meditation, just like you have to practice gratitude. It's something that I even have to really be intentional about, because I tend to just be a go, 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 go. And sometimes taking a moment just to take a beat can be a challenge for me. So that's something that I know I work on. So my goal for today was to talk about like menopause and maintaining weight. We tend to start to collect a little bit extra around the midsection during menopause. I know I'm finding that, and it is stubborn. It is persistent. It is hanging on for dear life. And I just wanted to share what I'm working on. I do not have it perfect. You know, there's this space between what we know and execution, and then even after execution, before we see results, right? So there's a lot of room in there. I will tell you, at least today, what I know based on what I know as far as the research. And there's some folks that I follow that I feel, again, are rooted in, you know, good, solid physiology. The things that I've picked up, you know, reading and doing all of that, ways that I'm trying to implement it slowly into my life. And I'm still figuring out like when I see some results, right? So I do not have this stuff perfect. I will be the first person to tell you. So I am doing this with you. So I wanted to just talk about, what do we do about this thing, this extra that just, God almighty, it just is relentless. So if you listen to some of the past talks that we've had, hopefully by now you understand the physiology of why we are where we are, what is happening. Because as estrogen declines, we tend to start to deposit more fat. It gets really hard for us to build lean muscle. And we can start to gain a little weight that you could be doing the exact same thing. I can't even tell you how much I hear this. I'm doing the exact same thing I was doing before, and I'm gaining weight, or I can't lose weight. I haven't changed anything. My eating's the same. My exercise is the same. And when I listen to them, right, they've got a pretty decent nutrition. They're doing all the right exercise. You know, maybe there's some little fine tuning, but overall 80-90% is pretty on point. And it's there, and it just is not going away. So what do we do about that? So we understand hopefully why it's happening. You're not crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. It is the nature of as estrogen falls. And it's not to say just supplementing with estrogen makes everything go away. We really have to change and really mix up what we do. So because we tend to gain more fat, belly fat specifically, and we start to gain weight, the idea is how do we start to lose some of that? So a couple things that I have, at least again, the physiology and what I've learned in reading, there's a physiologist, a physician who comes more from a PhD background. Stacy Sims is her name. And she's written a book. She's got two books. One is called Roar and the other is called Next Level. I really like her stuff. Again, it's research-based. It's science. It's not, you know, the loudest person on Instagram. It's not, you know, the person who doesn't have the background but just has really good clickbait stuff going on. So I would highly encourage you, if you're in this bucket of, God, this thing is just relentless, checking out a book from the library. I personally have a library and I let my patients check out any book, so I have both her books. I'd encourage you to read it because I think she's got a few things in here that are different and I think they are helpful. So Stacy Sims, a couple things that I think are different. One, her protein recommendations are more than what you would see out in sort of mainstream media. So I even went to the Menopause Society, which I've got her book. I'll show you Roar. This is one of them, Roar. And then she's also written another book called Next Level. So I would highly recommend either of those. Roar is kind of her first one and the Next Level is the other. It's all about female physiology, right? She talks about, as we are still menstruating, what happens when we are in a high estrogen phase versus a high progesterone phase. When should we be doing more cardio versus more lifting based on our hormones? So if we are, you know, even if you're listening to this and you're not postmenopausal, or if you're perimenopausal and you're still going through some of that cycling, right? You're still finding yourself, you know, doing the dips with the estrogen and progesterone. Her book is really good because she talks about when can you get the maximum benefit from your exercise and what kind of exercise should you be doing based on your phase of your menstruation. And then she also has a big section in here about, again, as we start to decline and get into menopause, how that changes. The other thing I really like about her as well, she even talks for us crazy vegans out there, right, who don't rely on meat protein, because it's a whole different can of worms if we're not relying on meat for our protein needs. And there's some that are really challenging for us, and we have to be really, really intentional with our protein and what kind of amino acids we need in order to build muscle. So highly recommend Stacy Sims. So for her protein recommendations are different than what you'll hear out in mainstream media and sort of what's conventionally stated. So even Menopause Society, who I highly respect when it comes to, what are the recommendations around hormone replacement? Is there a role for testosterone? Should we be using topical? Should it be oral? All of that. Highly respected organization, and I rely on them for a lot of good clinical information. Their protein requirements, in my opinion, are lower, right? They say, you should have a lower amount of protein. But Stacy, I think, has a better understanding of female physiology. She's really good about saying we're not just small men. Our physiology is very, very different. So her protein requirements are 0.6 to 0.8 milligrams per pound of your ideal body weight. So that's really where we should be. And I'm because in her book, she also talks about, she's dealing with athletes a lot of time. So she really breaks it down on, okay, are you looking for protein requirements when you are doing an endurance activity? So long bouts of exercise. What are your protein requirements when you're in recovery? What are your protein requirements if you're in sort of a kind of high intensity activity? So she really breaks it down. But I think a good middle of the road for just about anybody is 0.6 to 0.8 milligrams of protein per pound of body weight. I also like it because she talks about pounds, and I don't have to do this crazy kilogram conversion in my brain. So that is a good starting point, ideal weight, right? Starting point for your protein requirements. Now, that takes a kind of work initially to calculate. And then as you go through your day, trying to figure out, okay, how much does that look like and feel like? And I think once you do that for a little while, you kind of get a sense of, okay, if I do this for breakfast, lunch, dinner, I can kind of get in that ballpark. So protein is critical for fat loss. So that's why I bring up protein. There is a lot of information out there that talks about, we talk about protein too much. People get too excited about protein. Don't overeat your protein, which I think if you're doing a lot of meat protein, that can be challenging. If you're really over consuming on meat protein, I've seen and taken care of patients that will start to see some slow decline in their kidney function. Their uric acid, which is an inflammatory marker, will start to go up, especially if we're consuming a lot of red meat. I'm not here to say that everybody needs to be vegan, so let's just put that aside. I'm just telling you what I see as a doc. When I watch and I take care of people, what I start to see in their labs, in their inflammatory markers, and their risk for other disease. If you're consuming a lot of red meat, I've seen it. You can choose to continue to do so. Just here to give out information. So protein, if we're doing a lot of meat protein, absolutely, we have to be very, very careful. 0.6 to 0.8 grams of a plant-based protein, I don't have any issues with that. Even if you want to sprinkle in some lean meat protein, that's perfectly fine. If you don't choose to be vegan like I do, doing lean meats is certainly healthier for you than really leaning on your red meats for your protein requirements. So that's the first thing, is protein, because enough protein is critical for fat loss. And again, I will be the first to tell you, as someone who chooses to lean on plant-based protein, that becomes challenging, right? I've been more cognizant of really tracking my protein. And because most of my protein is going to come from beans and legumes and obviously some tofu and soy products, because of the beans, I tend to have a much higher carbohydrate intake as well. So I have to be mindful, although they are complex carbohydrates, which are their healthier option, I have to be mindful of that. So I'm trying to play this balance between not over-carbing myself, although they're complex and healthy, and still getting my protein needs. So it can get a little tricky as a vegan or a vegetarian, but the protein needs are still the same. So 0.6 to 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. Ideal. body weight. So that's the first thing that is, I think, different that I really like about Stacy Sims, which is different than what you're going to read on it in sort of mainstream media. Where you get your protein, how you get your protein, that's something that you need to nuance with whether it's your physician, a nutritionist, a health coach. There are lots of resources out there. If you're more of a just give me the information, let me read it, I'll figure it out, Stacy Sims is a great place to start. I have access to some recipe websites if people are interested and want help with that. I'm happy to share that free, where you can kind of put in what you're looking for and it'll dump out a bunch of recipes. So happy to share that as a resource for people. Again, I've got cookbooks galore that I share with patients. So let me know if you need help with that. But finding a way to sort of see how much protein you're getting is critical. So then the next piece becomes, how are we moving? Again, typical convention, and I've been saying it too, 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity activity with 2 days of strength training. That's like, if you read out in mainstream media, that's the recommendation that everybody gets. Again, it's on all of our, if you look at sort of the societies, it's there as well. 150 minutes of moderate intensity activity, 75 minutes if you're going to be doing high intensity activity with 2 days of strength training. Well, when we start to go through perimenopause and menopause, you got to shake the deck, right? You got to change things up. So for us, 2 differences that we need to do. One is we need to lean more on high intensity activity. I think Stacy calls it SIT, or short intensity physical activity. Because the idea is this sort of steady state, cardio, zone 2, just kind of humming along, is great maybe for cardiovascular health, but it does nothing for our metabolism. So in order to ramp up our metabolism, we need to do short interval, high intensity activity. And that can look very different, right? You can run hills is one way to do it. You can do sprints. You can also do more like kettlebell compound movements that are, again, 40 minutes, 20 minutes a rep. There's even, if you ride a Peloton, you can do more high intensity activity on a Peloton. You can jump rope, right? There's lots of different ways. The idea, though, is you want to do max effort. I'm talking gassed out, right? Can't take a breath, can't talk, max effort for shorter durations, brief rest, get after it again. That short intensity is going to have more beneficial effect for our metabolism than go for a run 3 miles or going for a walk. Great. I'm not saying these things are not good for you. If you're really trying to change your metabolism, we got to do this short interval thing, right? We got to really empty the tank for a short amount of time, take a beat, empty the tank, and you want to do 3 to 4 reps of that, take a long break, and then come back into it. So Stacy talks about that as well. That's another thing that's very different, right? Again, female physiology is different. We are different. We are not just small women. I love when she says that. So we have to do things a little bit differently. So really switching to short, quick, high intensity activity. The other thing is lifting. And I'll go back, right? I have fallen in love with running late in my life. It's a crazy here comes. I know, exactly, right? It's a crazy thing that I fell in love with running. When I played sports, I've played sports my whole life. I've got all male cousins. My mom hated it, but I was always outside playing football and, rumble and tumbling and just, anyway, that was tough for my mom. So running, I would play sports, but to just say I'm going to go for a run, I was like, why would people do that? That's the craziest thing ever. Anyway, fast forward many, 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 many years, I've fallen in love with running. I love to run. So for me to go for a run, I love to do that. So switching to do this high intensity is a challenge. And I honestly have not quite figured out how to make that part of my life. So I'm still working through this myself because my inclination is to run or just go play a sport, but that's different, right? So I too am struggling with how do I integrate this high intensity stuff into my life. So again, have not got this stuff figured out, but I can tell you what I know would be my recommendation. But I tell you, I'm also in there with you. So doing this high intensity, I'm trying to figure out how to make this part of my life. Then the next thing becomes lifting. So again, this is I'm getting into this. Also had to change my whole routine, right? I was kind of dialed in. I was getting to the gym first thing in the morning before my work day. I was lifting. I was doing, like a HIIT class, right? That was one way. It was a really great class. I loved it. So I was getting that in. And then life, kids, working. Now I've had to shuffle the deck again. And I don't have the time to go out, before work to work out. So now I'm lifting in my basement. So I have fallen in love with this lifting, and you need to lift heavy. So again, it's not like, put 5 pounds in your hand, go for a walk and do some little curls, or it's, be able to do reps for 15, 30, 40 reps. That's not heavy enough. So we need to lift heavy. Again, if we want to build muscle, then we need to lift heavy, because the idea is we want to shift our body composition, right? That fat deposition starts to happen. We have a tough time building muscle. So the protein requirements, we need to increase and consume more. We need to up our metabolism with doing these sort of short interval, max effort, empty the tank for a short amount of time, rest, come back to it. And then to build muscle, we need to lift heavy. Obviously, we need to lift in a healthy way. So if you're new to this, whether it's getting in touch with a personal trainer, someone who can check your sort of foundational movements, make sure you're lifting appropriately, make sure you have the hip flexibility, the ankle flexibility, so that we're not hurting ourselves and taking ourselves out of the mix for an extended period of time. So make sure you're doing the foundational things first, that you've got the right support, you're lifting appropriately. Start when you're, at a comfortable weight. And then the idea is to really challenge the system with the amount of load that you are able to push, pull, and you want to work all your big muscle groups. So Stacy also spends a fair amount of time talking about that in her book as well. And I've really fallen in love with lifting. I mean, it is so gratifying to see that you can build strength, that you can do things and carry things, even functional things, because the idea for all of this, at least for me, is to add quality to my time here on this earth, whatever time I'm blessed with, to be here for my family, for my kids. I have young kids. I want time with them, and I don't want to just be here and them pushing me around in a wheelchair. I want to be able to do all the things they love to do for as long as I'm blessed to do it. So for me, it's not call it vanity, call it, I don't know, just feeling good. I don't want this extra here. I didn't have it a year ago. But for me, it's about, can I do the things that I want to do? So that's my motivation. Sure, I would love to look in the mirror and be like, yes, stacked, yes. But I don't have that right now. But I'm going to thank you. I'm going to keep working on it, but it's also about, my long-term goal is about quality of life. It's about a longevity. It's about being around for my family and being around for my kids. So being able to, piggyback my kids, being able to carry stuff around the house so that I know that I can take care of myself and take care of my family as my level of wisdom continues to increase. Those are my motivations, and those are the reasons why I do what I do. So find your thing, right? And if whatever that thing is, that's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit bolder, it's the thing that wakes you up at night because this is the thing you want to achieve. This is your reason for why we do all this crazy stuff that we do, why we're willing to shuffle the deck and start over when we feel like we had a nice little groove and now we got to mix it all up again. So all of that stuff, right? What is your reason and what is your motivation for doing it? Find that, keep it front of mind, write it down, put it on your phone as your screensaver, whatever you got to do to help you remember why we wake up and do the work and put in the effort. So find that sweet spot. So the 3 big things, right, when it comes to how do we lose that midsection, How do we switch our body composition? Because again, the tendency is our body is going to want to put on belly fat. It's going to be hard for us to gain muscle, and our metabolism is going to be very different. So protein requirements, 0.6 to 0.8 grams per pound of belly weight. High intensity, so that at least gives us the building blocks that we need to start to put on muscle. I didn't touch on leucine. We talked about leucine in another topic. So leucine in particular is an amino acid that is really important. As a vegetarian, it gets harder. Whey protein has a lot of leucine. So look up leucine and food sources for leucine. But that in particular is an amino acid that's really important for building muscle. So protein, high intensity for your metabolism, and then lifting heavy to actually build the muscle, to put on the muscle. Muscle also will help you. The protein also helps you lose fat, right? So you need the protein to reduce your fat. So those three things we need to do differently. Then it comes down to other things that I've started to look at and say, okay, this has some good evidence. When it comes to just metabolic health, right? We want to sort of maintain this overall health. I've spent a lot of time talking about, okay, having a high quality diet and nutrition, right? So some simple things to think about. Breakfast, think about making it kind of more of a savory, put some protein in there. If you've got any sort of refined sugars in your breakfast, see if you can peel that stuff out. Any added sugar. So common things that'll have sugars. If we're doing shakes in the morning, be careful about, are there sugars in your powder if you're doing a protein powder? Are you doing any kind of juices that have sugars in them? The idea is if we can start our day with like a good foundation of protein, healthy fats, if we choose to put a carb in there, make it a complex carbohydrate, stay away from refined carbohydrates first thing in the morning, that sets your metabolic system off to a really good start, as opposed to sugars and refined carbs. Yeah, sugar is crack, no doubt. All of that stuff, because then you're chasing that demon all day long, right? Because the sugar is going to go, it's going to ramp up in your bloodstream. Insulin is going to get released. Insulin is going to push all that stuff into your cells, and then you're going to do a crash, and then you're going to chase sugar again. So if we can start our day, think more savory, good solid lean protein or plant-based protein, put some veggies in there for complex carbohydrates if you can. So it's almost like, most American breakfast is like bacon and eggs with toast, or again, I'm super generalizing, or box cereal, or a bagel with cream cheese. Like all of that stuff is like ramp sugar, and then you're chasing it all day long. So it's almost like what I think of like as a lunch, or maybe even a dinner. You want to move that to your breakfast. That's one way to start to sort of even out the chase and even out your metabolic function throughout the day. Egg whites with veggies and oatmeal with flaxseed most mornings. Okay, I love that. That's actually good. Think of that. Do you do store-bought? And then are we adding anything to the oatmeal, right? Are you doing whole milk, soy milk, almond milk? Are we doing any brown sugar, honeys? So as long as we're not adding like the super sweet stuff, yeah, just be mindful of if we're putting any sweeteners in there, those sorts of things. Cinnamon is honey's a sweetener. It's sugar. I know people think it's a natural. Yeah, so cinnamon is good because cinnamon actually cuts some of that quick kind of sugar spike. So cinnamon is great. The honey, be mindful of that honey because it's a sweetener. It's, you know what I mean? So that tends to spike the sugar a little bit more. So just consider that a little bit. So that's one thing, right? Switch and make sure you've got a good base in the morning. The other thing is after our meals, if you can, get in a little bit of something. 10, 15 minutes of some sort of activity, because then that moves things into the cells and doesn't let it sit in your system, starts to kind of burn things for you. So go for a walk, do some squats. I hear you. I'm chocolate. Chocolate is oh my gosh. You can have candies. I could leave it. But chocolate, God, man. Doing some form of activity, right after we eat, 10, 15 minutes after for a 15, 20 minute walk or something, right? Just to kind of, so things don't just sit in our serum. Sugar, whatever energy, whatever we eat gets converted, right, to some sort of glucose. How fast that happens is depending on the macronutrient we eat. So you want to shuttle that stuff into the system. You want the muscle, using your muscle pulls that glucose out of the system and into the muscle for use. Insulin sort of pushes that stuff into the cell. So doing some form of activity after we eat can be helpful. And these artificial sweeteners sometimes are just as bad. If it's an artificial sweetener, sometimes they're just as bad, sadly, as sugar. And when I say just as bad, meaning maybe they don't cause the big glucose spikes, but they're not, I wouldn't necessarily think of them as a healthy choice, I guess. Right? Everything is on a continuum. Everything is. And that's not to say that we have to be perfect. I'll use oils as an example. So all the oils are really calorie dense, but olive oil is probably the best choice of all the oils. But I also still tell my patients to be very judicious when they use olive oil. So I guess that would be kind of my take on sweeteners. Maybe they aren't going to spike your sugar as much as like a true sugar, like as a true glucose, but they're not necessarily healthy. So I don't want you to feel like, ooh, I'm using an artificial sweetener, therefore this is a healthy choice. I would still use it in limited quantity, to be honest with you, really all the artificial sweeteners. So we talked about protein, HIIT exercises, which we're all trying to figure out how to do that. I think there's 3 of us on here. If we all lived in the same area, we'd figure out how to do HIIT together. You're very welcome. Yeah. Lifting heavy, right? Those 3 things. Savory breakfast. Try, as best you can, eliminate all sugars from your breakfast so that you're not chasing that demon all day long. Good solid protein, healthy fat. And if you choose to do carbs, make sure it's a complex carbohydrate, not a refined carbohydrate. And then any like added sweeteners, sugars, all of that, try to get that out of your breakfast. And then 15 minutes or so after you eat, go for a 15, 20 minute something. Fill in the blank, exercise, motion, do something that moves whatever conversion of your macronutrient, protein, fat, carb, that gets converted to energy, i.e. glucose. Your body uses that, so it's not rumbling around in your bloodstream. Obviously, sleep is huge. If we're not sleeping well, we're going to hold on to fat. It's just a fact. I will. Sleep is huge, so gotta get good sleep. That is tough for a lot of people, myself included. So just doing your best to really set up a consistent sleep schedule. Put it on your calendar if you need to. I've got a whole sleep thing. I love to talk about sleep, but sleep is huge. And then managing your stress, which takes me back to some of the meditation stuff we talked about really early in the talk. So whatever we got to do to manage our stress, it's going to happen. Life is hard. Right now, the world is crazy. It is nuts. Every morning I wake up like, God help us, what has happened overnight while I was asleep? So whatever way you find to manage your stress, if it's exercise, if it's community, if it's laughter, if it's reading a great book, if it's journaling, painting, whatever your stress relief is, as long as it's not alcohol, do that thing, right? Because that also makes a difference. Both of those are going to feed cortisol. Cortisol makes it really hard to lose weight if we're not getting enough sleep, if our stress is like out of this world and we're not managing it. The book, Stacy Sims, I love her. Roar. This is the book. She's really good. She's got another book called Next Level, but this is a great place to start. So I'd start with Roar. Love my smartwatch. Yes. Gives me prompts and measure. Yes. Sleep is huge. Yeah. I use an Oura Ring because I can't sleep with my watch. So for me, the Oura Ring has been great. That's how I measure my sleep. And really, I look at, to be honest with you, the way I use my ring is I look at my heart rate, my resting heart rate, and my heart rate variability. Those are the 2 things that I can look at and I can tell right away how I'm doing across really all of my metrics. Because the minute my resting heart rate starts to go up, I know I'm kind of off. And the minute my heart rate variability starts to lessen, I know I'm off. So I know what my baselines are, and I can measure my overall health based on those 2 metrics in my ring. So I love that. So yeah, whatever way you use, or if you use something, I think it can be helpful. I love the interaction today. This was amazing. Share with your friends, invite others. I love to have folks listen. So again, topics, menopause and motherhood is coming. If I've got 1 or 2 other moms that are willing to chime in, that would be amazing. I want to kind of bring together a panel of folks to figure out how we do this do motherhood while we ourselves are going through the chaos of perimenopause and menopause. And then menopause and mental health is the other one I want to do. So any therapists out there, social workers that deal with this specific time in our life would be amazing. So if you know anybody, share this, talk to them, have them reach out to me or give me their information if they're willing, and I'll reach out to them. So I appreciate you. Appreciate everybody. All right. I'll see you guys later. Have a great week. Bye-bye.